live button. We are live. Tell your friends you're listening to the Verhoeven Effect podcast. I'm Conlon.
And I'm Nathan.
And tonight we have another very special episode. We have the 1982 movie Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. Nathan, do you have a history with this movie?
I think this one I might have seen in theaters.
Yeah.
And many times since. And this is my favorite movie of the I guess of the era of
Original
Star Trek, the original crew, and even
if this is your best of the original crew, then it's the best of all time.
Yeah, it's probably the best movie of all time.
In Star Trek.
In Star Trek. In the Star Trek franchise.
Yeah.
A close second being the Undiscovered Country, which interesting. It's like almost the same crew, so it's okay.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
And then probably, I mean, there's always the joke with the Star Trek franchises: the even ones are good and the odd ones are bad.
Yeah, I've heard that. That's a constant. That's a refrain. Well, it makes sense though, because essentially, this movie follows the 1979 Star Trek: The Motion Picture, which I also like for its beauty and its long shots and its ambition. But nobody really liked to sit in the theater and watch at the time because Star Wars was the thing. And it's like, what's this? But it's actually Star Trek: The Motion Picture was a very logical, reasonable successor to the TV series. It's like, yeah, that makes sense. And essentially Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, rebooted the franchise with the same actors, which has almost never been done before.
With like a third of the budget and all the same props.
A third of the budget. Well, but that's one thing I will say about this is my favorite Star Trek movie. However, this movie does not really hold up as well or look as cool as the motion picture does now. Yeah. Because you can definitely tell they cut a lot of corners.
I mean, this has to be the best leftovers movie ever made.
Oh yeah, easily. Yeah.
Because like the reason it costs so much less than the first one is because they just reused everything from the first one. It's like the money's already sunk in. Like, let's just do it.
Everything. The only thing they did different on the model of the Enterprise was they made it darker. That was literally it.
And the Reliant is just a genius hot rod job of the Enterprise.
Some crucial and interestingly debate in the Star Trek community about, again, the Reliant versus Enterprise. Because all the engineer genius types that make up a lot of the Star Trek fan world are like, well, doing a scan of the outside, the Reliant has more internal volume and is a larger ship. And then other guys will say, well, you're not accounting for the thickness of the hull and also the fact that it has a navigational deflector built into it somewhere where it's not like on the bottom of it, like the big starship, Star Trek, deflectors. It's like it also has to have one of those. It's built into the hull somehow. So that's taking up more space. So people will like vigorously debate. They're trying to create a fiction based around movie making, and economic movie making, because the crew that ran the Wrath of Khan was like Harv Bennett and a bunch of people from TV. That's like, and they said, because Paramount went to him as a producer and they said, hey, can you make this for half the budget of the motion picture? And he's like, I can make 5 movies for half the budget of the motion picture. Are you kidding me? We can do this. And Gene Roddenberry was definitely sidelined for this one.
Okay.
He had the title of creative consultant, because he wanted to do the sequel that he went to Paramount with was basically a continuation of City on the Edge of Forever, where the Klingons go back in time and stop the assassination of John F. Kennedy, and it screws up the timeline. And this was in 1982, and Paramount was like, no. No, we're not. We did the motion picture, and fans and critics alike were not happy, so... And also, the only way they could get Leonard Nimoy to do this movie is if they promised to kill Spock. He said he never wanted to do it. This is when Leonard Nimoy hated Spock. This was the I hate Spock time of his career.
Yeah.
Which weirdly did a 180 through the production of this movie. Where he's like, I love Spock.
Arguably, him not wanting to do Spock supercharged his career.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Because then he's like, would you want to produce or direct or whatever? He's like, yeah, I'll do that.
Both actually.
And I don't know even if that like started the trend of like Star Trek cast becoming like TV directors, but like they almost all do, because Jonathan Frakes directed like two of the or maybe no, I think I think just two of the next gen movies, and he's done like almost any Star Trek series afterwards. He's always a director on like the big episodes and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Yeah, because people have this weird thing like, oh, what happened to Jonathan? What happened to number one from the Next Generation? His career died. It's like, oh no, it didn't. He probably made more money doing what he's doing. And like he said, he didn't have to exercise all the time to fit in those uniforms. He's a fun interview. That guy, Jonathan Frakes, is a cool interview because he literally doesn't care. He'll say almost anything. I mean, he's not like horrible, but he's like, anything about the TV show, he'll laugh and be like, "No, you got that all wrong." And, it's like, oh, it wasn't nearly as fun as that. But also, weirdly, like that Next Generation cast was famous for they all pretty much got along and liked each other.
Huh. Okay.
Unlike the original series, the Kirk era stuff, where it's like, well, they sort of tried to like each other, but
well, I mean, like that's was it Denise Crosby? No, is that somebody else who played Tasha Yar?
Denise Crosby.
It's okay. Like, that there was like, because the Star Trek cast was always like, you don't want to get typecast, because now that's all they can do. All they can do is just do Star Trek. And then like what the convention circuit proved is like, yeah, that's all you need. Like, if you don't mind just slightly embarrassing yourself with your fans that are mostly like quiet and just want to be like in awe of you, and then some weirdos, like, you'll make a lot of money, because the Star Trek fan base is the richest fan base in the world.
Yeah, I mean, like tech guys will be your best friend, and, and they're actual geniuses. You're an actor. It's like these people. I love these guys.
So like I felt like, like Tasha Yar was like trying to learn the lesson from the original crew. It's like, I got to get out of this typecasting, and then just end up not working out in her favor. Although she did come back, and she's also like a director of Star Trek episodes and did documentaries and stuff like that, and came back and played different characters. So it's like she was proven wrong essentially. So
yeah.
Although I don't know, I guess the cast of the new Star Trek with the one with with Abrams, like, they've done pretty well for themselves. So.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Individually, so.
Yeah, I mean, who's the one guy? The guy who played Judge Dredd, played McCoy in the Abrams verse Star Trek. What's his name? He's in The Boys.
I'm forgetting with you.
Yeah, or New Zealand. I'm not sure which, but yeah.
Let's see, Judge Dredd. I guess just Dredd. Carl Urban.
Yeah, Carl Urban was really excited about getting together for another movie, but they were all like, yeah, they don't want to pay us as much, and the guy who played Captain Kirk, like, he has his whole career now. He's like, yeah, I don't really want to do this again. So, that one was an okay diversion. I'm still ready for another Star Trek to come along.
Yeah, they're all the new ones are fine. Although the second one, like, it has cool, like, oh yeah, this is kind of screwed up, and then just gets really stupid at the end.
Yeah.
The third one's fine, but it's another one of those where it just like, it feels like like they're like retracting in some way, where it's like, oh, it's one of those, like, they kind of want to do the Wrath of Khan, where it's like, we're just going to do a big television episode as a movie, and then it just feels small and you don't like it as much. Or the first one's still exciting, even though I think people roll their eyes of having the Beastie Boys. It's like, it's a young rebellious Kirk. Of course he's got like the Beastie Boys. They're not going to make an original song from whenever from 2200 that's as cool as the Beastie Boys Sabotage.
Yeah, they keep like this notion of like playing older music like in 100 years from now. It's like, oh, that's not going to happen. That's just silly like fan service to the audience. It's like, well, have you paid attention to the state of music since like the early 2000s? It's like it's 2024. They haven't made another Pink Floyd. It's, I doubt that that's like a
Well,
far-fetched idea.
well, I don't know. I guess in next gen they always are having. It's probably just easier for your music budget, but they just have everybody just appreciates classical music because there's no rights to
Yeah.
it.
All these guys are into Brahm. It's like, yeah, well, he's been dead for 400 years.
So yeah, it came out June 4th, 1982. So another summer movie. Director is Nicholas Meyer, who has a really interesting career.
Just done some cool stuff.
He's like from New York, but he went to the University of Iowa. I don't know. In this like little bio, it says like fame for the Writers Workshop, which I don't know if he was actually in the Writers Workshop. Maybe he was, but
Wow, the first things he sold in Hollywood were he was always a writer, director. It has his more writing credits than directing credits, so maybe he did. I don't know.
Well, there's some other trivia I read that said that during the writer's strike he got into books because I read some of his. Well, I read one of his books. He did a Sherlock Holmes book called The 7% Solution.
Oh, is that when Sherlock Holmes was trying to quit using morphine?
Yeah, and so
Sigmund Freud helped him or something.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
And then they solve a murder together. So,
wait, did they travel through time in that one, or am I mixing them
no,
up?
I don't know. They didn't travel through time. So I mean, it's supposed to be an older. It's supposed to be an older Holmes. And they made a movie out of it. So.
Oh, okay.
Like Robert Duvall as Watson.
Nice.
I remember being a good book, but yeah, because I always associated him with him being like the genius because he does this in Undiscovered Country, so I kind of associate him as being like the secret heavy lifter of all this. I'm not sure if that's true or not because he's uncredited as writing on this movie, which I feel like he must have done a lot of behind the scenes work, but that's just my feeling. I don't know. He's not listed as one of the writers, so because we've got Jack B. Sowards, who I believe is. Yeah, he's just kind of and Harv Bennett is like got his story by credit. But yeah, these guys seem to be just kind of like people that like usher the Star Trek franchise along. So I don't even know like necessarily how to evaluate their writing skills because they just kind of seem to be mostly attached with Star Trek. So,
well, it's interesting. Harv Bennett, Nicholas Meyer, and a bunch of the production people had never seen an episode of Star Trek.
Okay,
they had to like do a crash course on Star Trek because they just weren't. They didn't hate it. They just it never was really their thing.
Yeah.
And then it's like, hey, can you make a movie? And of course, you never say no when they ask you. Yes, sure. And it's like, well, especially if you're like like Harv Bennett's a TV guy with a lot of. It's like, yeah, I think I can do this, and so yeah, because he came from TV, and I forget who else.
But yeah, like the biggest thing Nicholas Meyer's done, which like this is all good stuff. Like he does Wrath of Khan, he does. What was it The Day After? It's like a huge
the nuclear war movie, TV, big TV movie.
Yes, like hundreds of millions of people watched that or something like that. It was crazy how big that was. And then he's a writer on Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home, which is another huge movie, and that one's directed by Leonard Nimoy, I think. And then he comes back for Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country, which is like like you said, probably the second best in the original series.
And it's the send off of the original crew. It's the last time you see all them in one movie.
Yeah. And they just do, and like I didn't necessarily notice here the whole starting of like we're just gonna like steal lines from poetry and literature and Shakespeare and just insert them into Star Trek.
Moby Dick. We're gonna quote Moby Dick.
Well, I didn't know the line that appeared here about like you have to hear Shakespeare in the original Klingon, which I thought that was always a Star Trek 6 line, but it's in this movie. So it's like, oh,
Oh,
okay. Well, actually, Khan says that. So, because for me, that was always the shortcut of like what they were doing with these movies is like just take this cool, pithy dialogue, get a great like theater actor, and then throw a bunch of makeup on them. It's like genius.
it gives it gravity.
Yeah, and they just get to chew the scenery, so it's great. Um, but yeah, like but it seems like Nicholas Meyer just kind of disappears. Like he has some, like I don't know, like he has some. I think there's the Human Stain is a, yeah, it's got like Anthony Hopkins in it and Ed Harris and Nicole Kidman. I've never seen it. I just remember, I just know it exists. Um, and apparently he has some co-creator credit on some TV series called Medici, which I've never seen. But yeah, I don't know. I guess he just gets to pick what he wants to do, or I'm not sure. But he seems to be really good at what he does, and like almost everything he's involved with is like seems to be like good to great. So
Yeah.
so maybe he's just being choosy, or maybe he just like or maybe he has even more books and he got more into like novels, and I just didn't realize he has more novels than movies. On,
Well, from what I understand about Nicholas Meyer, the thing with him is like not so much in the Wrath of Khan Day After era, but he became a director where it's like I want full control.
okay.
And once you establish yourself as one of those guys, it's like, yeah, the work kind of dries up because it's because you have, and not because he's wrong for wanting full control. Apparently he isn't. He does quality work, and he takes, because taking something like Star Trek, especially, which had been kind of thrown into a wood chipper after the motion picture, and making a win out of it is like, that's a hat trick at that point. So he's obviously, a creative guy, but yeah, when you have those egos that collide, like like you read about, it's like, yeah, some people don't like the full control guys. They want team players, and that could not be totally false. And I'm just getting that information wrong, but it's something's got to explain it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
he just also inherited an oil field or something. You never know.
Or touch somebody. You never know. You'll never be surprised by Hollywood and their how depraved it can be for literally no reason.
There's literally no excuse. It's like, hey, you're doing something you love, you're enjoying it, and you have millions of dollars. What are you going to do? Sexually harass some like production assistant at work, even though I could have sex with like any woman I wanted to. It's like, I'm going to like debase and degrade her in front of other people and make uncomfortable sexual advances, which we don't know if that happened in this case.
No,
nothing to do with this guy, but it's weird how people do that. I just totally don't get that.
Yeah. Some people require a private life and get it, but it's not that many people in Hollywood. So I guess if you can get your money and get out, like, good for you.
Probably, yeah. Like I said, I've never made a movie, but I'm sure based on what I've read, I would probably do it once just to say I did it and be like, nope, not for me.
The director of photography is Gain Reschner or Rescher, yeah.
Rescher, yeah.
This is kind of his biggest credit. I'm not sure. Did you recognize anything off of his?
He is more famous for being in the camera and he was like an organizer for the camera operators.
Okay.
He's mostly a TV guy, almost exclusively a TV guy.
That makes a lot of sense, especially for this movie. It's like,
yeah,
we shoot fast and cheap. Get the TV guys.
Yeah. He is more known as being the president and organizer for the there's all these unions have just consolidated it over the years. Yeah, basically the camera guys union. That's what I'm going to call it because I don't know. Yep.
The main cast, of course, William Shatner, Leonard Nimoy, and DeForest Kelley, and everybody else that you'll never recognize, but like
everyone else that you've seen in everything all the
time. Which that's funny because it's just like, of course, these people they're not necessarily movie stars, but you put them all together and they're movie stars. Because it feels like Ahura like really just got the short shrift in this movie. Because like I'm watching it this time, I realized she has like 4 lines in this movie. So.
Yeah.
I'm
Yes.
not sure if I'm not sure when she's like in her 60s dancing half naked in Star Trek V if that's like a step up or step down for her. It's like, well, at least she gets to do something.
Let's see who's in here that was like, we got BB Besh was Dr. Carol Marcus,
Yeah.
and then
Oh.
Merrick Butrick played David Marcus, Carol and Kirk's son.
And of course, Kirstie Alley.
Kirstie Alley and Paul Winfield.
Oh yeah.
He was like,
but she's in tons of stuff, but I really only recognize him here and as like he's the detective in the Terminator.
oh, that's right.
But he's in tons of things, so.
Yeah.
And I guess
Kirstie Alley. Oh yeah, that's right. She's dead. I keep forgetting. Like,
did she die?
Yeah, she died like 2 years ago.
Oh, I don't remember that. I always remember her just being crazy.
I'm not sure what happened because I know she had things with her weight.
Yeah.
And she died of colon cancer. Huh. Oh yeah, she was 71. Oh man.
Yeah, this is like so. Yeah, Khan comes out of a Star Trek episode called Space Seed, which I did a quick watch of it, which I've never actually until now bothered to actually watch that episode to see what happens.
Oh yeah, that's actually, you realize it's like, oh, he remembered how to play that guy.
Yeah, I saw some trivia that like he requested the episode and watched it like a bunch of times until he could get back in the mood because I guess his tenure on was it
Fantasy
Island like kind of like he just got locked in that mode and didn't know how to get back.
Well, he was also filming it at the same time because him and Kirk are never on screen together.
Oh yeah, I guess that makes sense.
I don't think him and William Shatner ever saw each other except during like promotional stuff. Not that they didn't want to; it's just he was that busy. He was like, I got to go here, I got to go there.
It makes sense. Like, I mean, it's based. I mean, all Star Trek movies are essentially submarine movies. Like, you're never gonna see each other. So. Yeah. But there they say he's a Sikh. They also have like, it's Lieutenant MacGyver is like this busty redhead who gets infatuated with him, which that's the wife who dies that they mentioned in this movie.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
So I didn't know that was the whole thing because she's like a part of the Enterprise crew and kind of defects to stay with Khan. And then although there's a great scene with him and McCoy, where like Khan wakes up while McCoy's in another room and he grabs a knife and then Khan pretends to sleep when the doctor comes up and then he grabs him by the throat and puts the knife to his throat and then McCoy just like no-sells it. It's like, so you're gonna choke me to death or stab me?
Yeah.
And then he's like, where? And then Khan's like, where am I? And he says like, it'll be easier to kill me if you just cut the carotid artery along the left ear. It's like, that's, and that calms Khan down for some reason. It's like, oh man, McCoy's a badass.
Oh yeah, McCoy's delivery is always because it's always like a Spock. You're a damn emotionless monster, but really McCoy's like pretty emotionless himself. Pay attention, or at least he's calm.
Yeah, on the job he's he's more like Spock than he wants to admit. Off the job he's like a drinking cowboy.
Yeah, oh yeah. No, I don't know who drinks more, him or Scotty. They never really.
Yeah, and then Khan's origin was also like he's from Earth. There was like the eugenics war where he was a part of a super race.
Yes, the eugenics war on Earth that like we've already been through, I guess, because I think it happened in the 90s.
It happened in the 90s, yeah. Which like the ship is supposed to be like full of like all different kinds of ethnicities, so they get a Mexican guy to play an Indian guy. So.
Yeah, it's multicultural.
That's not really played up in the movie. That's just kind of more because like the ship is supposed to be like, oh, there's like, an uber German guy, of course, and then there's like an uber, British man, an uber African, all that stuff. So, um, and then they try to take the ship over from Kirk because he's also supposed to be a genius. Like not only is he physically superior, but mentally superior.
Yeah.
But that's always their downfall, is their arrogance because of their superiority. But it was an interesting episode. Yeah, then they I don't know, here it gets recategorized as they marooned them on Steady Alpha 5. In the episode, it's like, oh, we're gonna give you a planet. It's kind of hard to live there, but it has the same specs as Australia, which is the namesake of their ship, Botany Bay, which was the prison colony on Australia. So like I thought they linked all that together. It's like, well, here's like planet Australia. It's like have a good time. Like I'm pretty sure you'll do fine. And then here we find out it's like horrible things happen. So for Act 1, we open on a star field. We get the Star Trek horns. We get long credits, and then we eventually get titles in the 23rd century. Then we get some actual computer graphics. These are one of the first ever computer graphics used in movies. At least I know the Genesis sequences.
Yeah.
I guess that's just full on CGI. I'm not necessarily. Well, I guess it's all computer graphics, but we get some.
And the company that did that later became Pixar.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it was like the nucleus of what became Pixar.
Yeah,
I don't know if any of the people that did that actually work at Pixar today, but you know how that stuff goes. Yeah.
And was that on itself, or was that like a part of Lucasfilm at the time?
Part of Lucasfilm.
Okay. All right.
It was just it was called ILM Animation.
And then we come out of the computer graphics and we get Spock. He's looking at the graphics. This is Leonard Nimoy, of course. He's observing the bridge. We get Sulu's navigating. We get Savick, a new character played by Kirstie Alley. She's a Vulcan, which it seems like, wow, in this movie, it's like she's way too emotional to be a Vulcan. It's like, is she like half Vulcan or something? But if you hear, as far as I know it, like the full like character arc of what was supposed to happen with her character would have been way more interesting, because she's supposed to go from this to search for Spock and end up in the undiscovered country where she's revealed to be a Romulan that betrays the crew, which would have been a really interesting through the original series movies arc, but that doesn't end up happening. But
nope.
So that would explain things like why is she emotional. It's like, oh, because she's actually like the complete opposite of a Vulcan. I don't know. Yeah, it would just, yeah. I mean, I guess Romulans aren't necessarily just like full on emotional, but they're just reserved in a brutal way.
Well, yeah. I mean, the thing with like Vulcans, they're not. I mean, first of all Star Trek aliens, as originally written, are just amplifications of different facets of humanity.
Yeah.
Vulcans are just the rational side of humanity. Klingons are the violent side. And then Romulans kind of fit in that center of like rational and cunning. Like humans are rational and optimistic. Romulans are rational and cunning because they live in closed societies where they betray each other all the time. And it's like, so it was always like the Klingons are the Russians. It's like, what are the Romulans? Like, oh, they're the Chinese, So it was always, how do these things relate to stuff in our real world? But even with the Vulcans are not emotionless. They just work very hard to suppress their emotions. And they believe that operating in a system of pure rationality is a shield from a ultra violent past where they almost wipe themselves out. But then it's said that humans are actually, of all the Federation species, like the most violent. Like our history is the most violent, but we also had like one of the best planets to make a lot of people on. And because like Vulcan's basically a desert, because there weren't a lot of Vulcans. There were some, but there weren't like billions. Not like Earth, where we just killed hundreds of millions of people. But then the Romulans and the Klingons grew up in Well, the Romulans were just Vulcans that left because they didn't want to following the teachings of the Vulcan who decided we got to shed our emotions. We're just gonna so yeah, they're basically like what Vulcans would be if they had no like moral compass and didn't strive to just be rational. Or they're rational in the worst possible way, I guess.
Yeah, there's probably some of it because, like, they're called Romulans, so it's like, oh, it kind of sounds Roman. But in Romulan and Remus, what theology is that from? Or I guess,
Well, those are those are the brothers that founded the Roman Empire in myth.
okay, that makes sense. Because they also give them Caesar haircuts, so it's like, are these just space Italians or what?
Yeah, yeah. Remus and Romulus were fed by a she wolf because their mother died in childbirth, so they were raised by a wolf, and they founded Rome. And they conquered the world. And I live right next to Romulus, Romulus, Michigan, the jewel of the Midwest.
So yeah, Saavik is acting as as captain here. She's giving commands. There's a distress signal from the Kobayashi Maru. They're stalled in the neutral zone, so Saavik takes them into the neutral zone for rescue. Here, I think Sulu says, "We're now in violation of treaty." Get 3 Klingon cruisers, intercept an attack, which I believe this is just reused footage from the first movie.
Yeah, this is motion picture attack sequence that everyone wanted, actually. Finally, they're doing it.
They're not just attacking a black cloud that makes them disappear.
Yeah. Yeah, and they stick around all 3 ships to be destroyed. It's like, well, after the first one disappeared, it's like, yeah, let's do that warp drive shit. It isn't working. But, the Klingons, it's like they must maintain honor no matter what.
But as the Klingons start to attack, basically every console just starts blowing up and killing everybody.
Yeah, because in the world of Star Trek, there are no fuses. All energy is just transmitted directly from the hull through to the operator. What's going on?
She gives the call to abandon ship, and then it's revealed to be a training session. Of course, this is the famous Kobayashi Maru thing that gets brought up over and over again. I don't even know where they grabbed that name from because it's a cool name.
What's the name of the ship? The neutronic fuel carrier that's struck a gravitic mine in the neutral zone.
Yeah, but where's Kobayashi Maru come from? Like, where they grabbed that from?
Oh, the original. I used to know and I forgot. Because this has overtaken it. But yeah, there is a. Oh.
There's some Japanese literature I'm not even thinking. Because it sounds Japanese. I'm guessing on that. I don't know if it is or not. So. Are you searching for it and the only thing coming up is Star Trek?
In Japanese, it means little wooden boat. I found that
okay.
out.
All right.
No, it's just something they made up for Star Trek. Okay, yeah, no, it's just a Star Trek boat.
Okay, yeah, it's cool nonetheless. It's it's been a touchstone throughout Star Trek, and even a burden in some ways. Got to keep coming back to it.
Well, it's because it's death.
Yeah,
because that's what the Kobayashi Maru symbolizes death.
Yeah,
and it's like the unescapable puzzle, which is death, and it happens. You can't, no matter how optimistic or how smart you are, it always happens. And it's even more poignant in a world where we're almost like post-human, like in Star Trek, but for weirdly, like they don't have big medical breakthroughs where no, people live 1,000 years. Like, no, they still get old and die pretty much at the same rate, but they live great lives until they do.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what Kobayashi Maru always meant for me, is like the inevitable creeping death that takes us all.
Yeah.
Or it's a bunch of Klingons attacking us. But,
well, it's also like, I don't know, there's even multiple spots in here where it's like, in the face of danger, be bold in case you win, or be bold in case you lose, because it's the best way to handle it.
Yeah, it's like the speech from, Gladiator. What we do in life echoes in eternity. It's like, yeah, that's a cool way to say you're going to go die. I did like the one from 300 better, though, when he's like, tonight we dine in hell. It's like, okay, well, we know what the end of this is going to be.
Yeah, that's That's a fun. Well, there's probably other people that say it too, but there's a Marine saying that like we Marines don't die, they regroup in hell.
Oh, okay.
um, which I just like the idea of that, like, oh, so you know you're going to hell, like you did bad things, but you're gonna make it like, no, but we're gonna be the cool people in hell.
Yeah,
We're gonna take over hell.
you know that saying from Paradise Lost, you know, a servant in heaven or a king in hell. I've made my choice. Okay.
They call us the devil dogs for reasons, multiples.
Be a good like comic book about how like all the dead Marines have taken over hell. Mounted some like, you know, weird multiple attack strategy against Satan and overthrew him. But they're not necessarily bad people, but they did enjoy the whole killing thing, so they just kind of keep hell running. Like as a clockwork thing. Like, well, we don't really know what else to do.
Yeah, I made my own cadence in the Marine Corps to sing, which is basically sort of that idea, because it starts like we're gonna kill them all just to begin. Then we'll we'll kill them all just to begin. Then we'll go to hell and we'll kill them again. We built a bridge to hell. We got a bridge to hell and a Mameluke sword. We're knocking on the devil's door. What the hell is it? Some beat the devil up and wear his horns as a crown. No, I wrote it down somewhere, but I have no idea where that is. Damn it, I can't remember it. Anyways, it ends with now there's a camp in hell for the devil dogs. It's like that.
That's cool.
Yeah, I mean that's always the Marine Corps gentleman, like just leaning into the baby killer thing too. You know, it's just like you can't stop us.
Well, I mean, that's the thing about life. You can either, you know, dread it or just embrace the horror. There's two ways. All roads lead to hell. How are you going to get there? You know, that's the question.
We had like a 27-year-old like staff sergeant. Like she would like come in and like, sup baby killers, and you feel like a rise of energy. It's like, yeah.
Must be a uniquely military thing. That would be so wild. Met with war. Like, what the fuck? You know what happened at the Nuremberg? Can't say that. Or at least don't write it down.
Anyway, so yeah, the Kobayashi Maru is revealed to be a training session. We get Admiral Kirk, William Shatner here, comes in to offer like criticism and advice. This is where he says the line, "How we deal with death is how we deal with life," and so that's
a lot of one-off lines thrown off here. Physician, heal thyself. I'm not a drama critic, and it was all like drama. You know, it's like
there's so many great lines in this movie probably from literature I don't know, so I don't even know if they're genius or they're just stealing from the right places. So
no, they're stealing from the right place.
Okay,
not because they're not creative; it's just because of the speed at which this was done.
Yeah.
It's because that thing about revenge served cold, you know, that comes from like Dangerous Liaisons, which is a French book. Which
I always thought that was Shakespeare. Okay,
no, that's from a French, and I forget how you say it in French. It sounds really cool though. It sounds even cooler. Revenge is a dish that's best served cold, but I can't do French very well. You can look it up on YouTube, everyone. It's fun. Just like Let the Good Times Roll sounds way cooler in French. I've always wanted to master how to say it, but then if I said it, people would then start talking to me in French, and I have to explain, wait, that's all I know. And then you're kind of a lame-o.
Yeah. They're training a new crew from Enterprise, which I guess is the first time I actually realized this whole time is that, like, oh, we have, like, these chiefs of, like, department chiefs, like, legendary department chiefs, and then everybody else is just like a cadet, which I guess I didn't realize until this viewing of the movie. So not necessarily operating on all cylinders here.
I know the Enterprise is basically a training ship at this point.
Yeah.
Like
which
it's not a
which
frontline ship anymore.
yeah, which makes sense, especially in the next movie where it's like the Excelsior is supposed to be the new flagship, but like because you grew up with like, oh, these are the Star Trek people. It's like, oh, it's always the Enterprise. The Enterprise is always the flagship, so it's like it can't be bad. But here, it's yeah, it's been they just don't they don't well they don't have the budget to point it out, but yeah, they aren't directly saying that the Enterprise isn't the flagship anymore. It's just kind of like, well, look at the situation. What's happening here is they have cadets and they have like trainee like veteran trainees here or trainers here. So
It also makes sense why people that are obviously like in their 50s or 60s are still in these like, oh, you're still a lieutenant, huh?
yeah.
Wow, that sucks, doesn't it? It's like,
We get Spock and Kirk discussing the Kobayashi Maru scenario, and Spock gave Kirk a hard book copy. I think it was right, Tale of Two Cities.
yes,
Okay.
I
Um,
believe so. Yeah.
which I guess would still be, I don't know, they don't really have the data pads this time around, but it would still be like kind of a unusual thing to have a hard copy book. Although, I don't know, Khan has a bunch.
Well, the thing with Kirk is he's like into antiques,
yeah.
and so yeah, it would be yeah, it was so yeah, that would be the thing.
Well, so it's like everything about this movie is about aging.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah.
like, oh, you like antiques because the time has passed you. Like time
I'm
is
becoming part of my collection. I think he
yes.
said.
And so yeah, so anytime he sees some now he has a dilemma of like seeing something old and appreciate and seeing something old and now feeling bad for himself because like I'm old and then trying to find like no, I still got it. Which they'll do. I still got it for another 20 years.
Yeah.
Which yeah, like William Shatner, this movie, he would have been around 50, 51, so he would have been at your age doing this movie. So
Yeah.
um,
Well, William Shatner is the only one whose rank makes sense for like
yeah,
the time he was like, yeah, this guy would probably be. But we don't know how much time has passed, and I don't know if they ever say between the events of the motion picture and the Wrath of Khan. But I think it's meant to be implied it's been like almost a decade. So
yeah.
I
I
believe
mean, they
I've
do
read.
say 15 years since
Yeah,
Khan, which is the correct years between when that episode aired and when this was released.
yeah,
So, but yeah, I don't know like where the motion picture necessarily fits in if they're saying it's 79 or not, but I don't know. Or I mean,
yeah.
relative, you know. But also just everything is so different because like, the costumes here are like a lot cooler and more practical than like the kind of blobs of
Oh, the '70s jumpers they were wearing.
yeah.
Yeah, the motion picture had the best like color scheme. Yeah, this is what a bunch of weirdos in California would think the future is like. And actually, like, yeah, it totally violated like the original series. Like, they had practical uniforms. It was only in the motion picture where they're like, we're all. It's like, what is this ship? A giant bong? What are you guys doing? And then they returned immediately to like the militaria stuff in this.
Yeah.
Which actually, then this lasted. I think these uniforms are still considered the best.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So I know there's leather versions of these now that they do in the cosplay stuff, and there's even like side universes of like where this era never ended in Star Trek. It's like the Next Generation never really happened, and it was just like, what would this be like if like it never evolved to the TNG? There's a lot of weird stuff in Star Trek you can follow. A lot of crazy fans that just want to live in one world.
Well, I love the little bit that like can be unbuttoned and just kind of and only Kirk does it, but it's like a great little bit because it's like it signifies things being undone because like
Yeah.
it's all prim and proper. Then there's like a bit where it comes undone because like we're a little loose and fast here. We don't have time to fix ourselves, and then it gets blood on it. It just like it's like another progression thing you can find in the movie. We cut to Kirk's hanging out at home. He seems, or I got, we're not. Yeah, is he at home?
Yeah, he's at home.
Okay.
He's hanging out in San Francisco. I don't know what his rent would be then.
Free, Nathan.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, the Star Trek economy was the best. The best. It was the best economy. It was the worst economy.
Kirk seems lonely. Then Dr. McCoy, DeForest Kelly, shows up, and he's got some Romulan ale with him. He gives him a pair of reading glasses, because I guess Kirk is like he would prescribe him something that would magically cure his nearsightedness, but or farsightedness. Yeah, right? No, what's he
Yeah.
have? Yeah. But I guess he's allergic to the medication, so he gives him some glasses, and of course Kirk looks at this like, oh yeah, another person reminded me that I'm old.
Yeah.
And I like McCoy says like, it's a birthday, Kirk. Why does it feel like a funeral? But here's where McCoy convinces Kirk he needs to take command one last time, so it just kind of like re-energizes Kirk a little bit. Then we cut to the Reliant rolls in, which again, this is like one of the greatest like hot rodding of the Enterprise, which became a whole other like this became a they did different versions of this in every Star Trek franchise afterwards.
Yeah. Actually, this was the most successful starship in history because if and now, like I said, I have all the Star Trek reference books and even the online stuff, and all the data is like wildly crazy all over the place about the Miranda class, but essentially it had 110-year service life, whereas the Constitution class only lasted like 60 years. So
yeah, because the
reality of it is like, oh, it's just a model we have, and we
Yeah.
can just like knock the roll bar off the top of it and change things around and say it's a different ship.
Yeah, well, I mean, like they had it getting destroyed by the Borg because they just needed that. They had some models laying around, like let's blow them up and put them in the thing. It's like another one of those things where it's like practicality meets the fan fiction, which is just great sometimes.
Oh yeah, yeah. When you have to adapt your fiction to like just movie and TV production budgets, it's like, no, this is why this is.
We get Chekhov is recording a log as first officer. They're looking at SETI Alpha 6, but they're particularly looking for a lifeless planet for Project Genesis. Chekhov thinks they've found life on the planet. I forget what they say specifically, something to suggest there could be some proto-molecules or something on there. So they need to go down and have a look at it. They call Dr. Carol, what's her, Marcus? Yeah.
Marcus.
This is BB Besh. And so, yeah, they're looking for mission to, like, if they find life, can we just transplant it and get rid of it? And she's like, no, but I guess. So, but importantly, she just makes them have to go down there and look for themselves. Then we cut to the regular one where Dr. Carol and her son talk about the Genesis Project being misused as a bomb. Jim Kirk is brought up, but like it's not mentioned that he's his father. So, but just know that like, oh, they have a history. So, or actually specifically, they don't have a history.
Yeah, they actually don't.
But yeah, this is always a thing about like people trying to make change for humanity with great scientific leaps, and then of course naive enough to be like, oh wait, someone might use this for bad.
Yeah, I mean, there's actually like, yeah, there's a whole like segment of this.
I like this kind of, I don't know, it kind of just, although the Genesis Project just kind of, I mean, they deal with it more in the next movie, but it kind of ends here.
It's sort of like a MacGuffin, almost. Well, it's like something like if Khan had just like destroyed Kirk, and then without like himself being destroyed, and then like kept the Genesis device, it's like, oh yeah, he would have just used it on Earth just to show, what it's like, oh, the real humans are out here in space now, and something like that. It's a horrible, it's a good bad idea, but it was proven like, yeah, it just it's too many it's too much of a like, oh yeah, it's just this explosion that recreates matter. As explored in what was it? It's very similar to the device in Ender's Game. the bomb that just feeds on itself as long as you
Oh,
feed energy into it. And
yeah.
it's like, yeah, what would that do to a planet with life on it? It's like, oh, it just annihilate it. It would just actually turn the planet into mud or something.
We cut to Captain Terrell of the Reliant. This is Paul Winfield here, and then Chekhov, played by Walter Koenig. Go down to City Alpha 6. It's a windy, lifeless desert. Uh, they have some sensor out, so they're wandering towards the reading. They find some structures and walk inside. So they're like, "Would somebody crash here? What's going on?" Actually, I think they call them like cargo things, or it's like, well, someone put this here intentionally. And then they go inside and they see some living quarters and stuff, and they're like, "Well, this is weird." They see a terrarium with something digging underneath, and they're like, "What's that?" And then Chekhov sees the Botany Bay label, and he gets scared and says, like, "We need to go." Which I know there's some debate here that, like, well, Chekhov wasn't in the first season, so why does he know who Kirk is? And it's like, well, just because he wasn't in the first season doesn't mean he was on the ship. So there's that debate going on, too. So.
And there's also like probably when he got on the ship, it's like, oh yeah, the ship was like taken over by someone once, and he was really a bad guy.
Yeah.
It was like, oh.
So yeah, they head outside and they're surrounded at the exit by people in like robes and special glasses. Then we cut to inside. And a man takes off his like metal gloves and stuff. Like it's kind of weird, the metal mask, and it's revealed to be Khan, played by Ricardo Montalban. And so here Khan recognizes Chekhov, which that's what people get. It's like, why would he recognize? Just because they didn't meet on camera doesn't mean whatever. It's fine.
It didn't take anything away from anyone just going in cold and watching this movie.
I love this movie, and I've seen it dozens of times. And like I said, the first time I watched the episode this is from was yesterday. So like you can totally watch this movie because he literally explains what happens in like 2 minutes here. It says they're marooned by Kirk on SETI Alpha 5. But then SETI Alpha 6 exploded and shifted the planets around and made things uninhabitable. So this is actually SETI Alpha 6. Or SETI Alpha 5, but they think it's 6. Which is interesting. It's I want to see that. How do you survive a planet exploding next to you?
It goes from space Australia to space desert. It's like, okay.
Which I guess you really don't survive. I guess these people only survive because they're, supermen or whatever. So, but also this is like where Khan realizes that they didn't intend to come here because he's thinking like, oh, you've come back for revenge or to gloat. He's like, oh no, they came here by accident.
Yeah, no, we didn't really care if you were alive or dead, which really pissed Khan off. Like, no, I matter.
So, I guess you could also argue, like, why would they get to City Alpha and then, like, why does, like, Chekhov not even, like, think of Khan? But, he just didn't, they got sensors. Like, they weren't reading life out there, He didn't remember. He's the first officer. Is he even manning, like, like these scientific stations? Yeah. He kind of is, actually, because he's the one that brings up.
Well, if the planet exploded, being you're traveling through space at like warp 9 consistently, and you had a planetary body explode even in a far corner of space, and you were then traveling in it, you think your maps would alert you, and there'd be like a bunch of dust floating around. like SETI Alpha 6 would probably look like Saturn with all the dust from a planet that exploded next to it. And just like, we don't see any of that. We don't know any of that. So it's like, yeah, it's kind of silly, but it also just works.
I also don't necessarily understand how SETI Alpha 5 then advances to SETI Alpha 6 if a planet disappears. Like, wouldn't it still be SETI Alpha 5?
No, you've been promoted.
Or did, like, the explosion of SETI Alpha 6 recongeal into a, like, much smaller planet inside of SETI Alpha 5 or something?
Someone's had to have made a YouTube video.
Yeah. I'm just here to speculate. Let's see here. Oh yeah, also this where Khan picks up Chekhov with one hand to show off how strong he is. which is funny. Yeah, he's got like this little like loop on his front of his chest that it's like it's a hand, it's like basically a hand grip intentionally there to kind of do that.
They did that with like a car jack, I think. The tied to the back of my. I guess Ricardo Montalban was like pretty strong anyway, but
Yeah.
no real
Oh
human
yeah,
is
it's
actually
like he's like
that strong.
he's like 60 in this movie. He's got an amazing chest. I mean, he's like hanging around Chippendales dancers, and he's like holding his own. So.
Oh yeah, I guess he loved to lift weights. Because his main character that he's known for, like Mr. Rourke, is like he's not a muscular, or he's not known as a muscular guy, but yeah, in real life, yeah, he like loved lifting weights and stuff.
And then we get
people can't pick up people one-handed usually unless they weigh 80 pounds, and it's
Khan messes around with some weird sandworm things, and he takes the larva off of it. He mentions that it killed his wife, which is presumably Lieutenant MacGyver's from the Space Seed episode. He talks about how like they get in your ear and wrap around your cerebral cortex, make you susceptible to suggestion, and then eventually like make you mad and or kill you. Like I don't know if they kill you themselves or you just kill yourself, like it's presented later on, but you know. But yeah,
it's probably grows into that big worm looking thing and your head just explodes. It's probably like the worst thing you could imagine. Which, if that's the only form of life left on the planet, I'd be like, wait, before you put that in my ear, do you eat these things? How does this work? What's the economy of food here for,
yeah, I mean, nightmares, so yeah, it's got to be it. Like, we got to eat our nightmares. Oh yeah, but yeah, this thing definitely, like, this is a great little thing that's a horror movie. I mean, it's probably like why like when I was a real little kid, like Star Trek 4 was more preferable to watch because that's a much more funner movie, and the direness there is more like kind of surreal and like environmental, or it's here it's like it's a horror movie at this moment.
It's a very dark movie.
Yeah,
it's a movie with a core of death and revenge. But it's also like it also works in the Star Trek universe.
So yeah, they put the worms in. Like when they put the worms, then they put their helmets on. The worms get in their ears. Which I think this is where I was always like had like a mental like fear of earwigs, because that's what they call them. And I'm like, is that the thing from Star Trek? And no, that's just what they call them. So they don't crawl in your ear and burrow into your head. But yeah,
oh, they look like nightmare things, but they're actually just kind of a flatworm.
Yeah.
It looks like eat my brain if I fall. It looks like the thing that would do it.
They put the worms in their ears and they start interrogating to try to figure out where Kirk is. So that being the end of Act 1, we got Act 2. Get Kirk, Bones, Uhura, and Sulu fly a shuttle to the Enterprise, and this is just the, porn shot of the Enterprise, which they did this in the motion picture, and like we're just gonna do it again. Because this is still like my favorite model of a Star Trek ship is this one.
Yes.
Which I've tried to
film crew hated this model, by the way.
Okay.
They hated all the original all the motion picture era Enterprises because of how you had to mount them to film them. It was a nightmare.
Yeah.
Because even though they're cool looking ships, they're just wildly impractical to deal with. Because they have those. I mean, I've built models of all kinds of things. I have 2 models of the Reliant, one that's lit. I've never built a large model of the Enterprise because they're just no fun. They're just not fun to make them work.
I built like the Mattel model twice, and the pylons just never want to stay on. They never line up correctly. So yeah, I've always been disappointed in it. But I was a child when I built those. I don't know, maybe. I don't know. Even there's a company that makes like a deluxe, like $500 version of that. Seems like it would be cool, but it still has problems. It's like, well, for $500, this should have no problems. But whatever.
Yeah.
I guess I'll enjoy the Hallmark toys that they put out, which are reasonable facsimiles.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Or even the micro machines of these are pretty cool. So. They get aboard. The admiral's welcomed aboard by Captain Spock, so he's running the ship as the training ship that got here. Kirk observes the young crew we get Spock and Savick have a Vulcan moment where they talk to each other in their Vulcan language, and I forget what they say, but they're just kind of like, oh, what does he say? Oh, she say something like, "When I didn't imagine him being so human" or something like that.
Yeah.
I think so, because then that has an echo later on. So, um, Kirk inspects the engineering bay. Kirk moves along to like taking the Enterprise out of dock because like he's supposed to spend more time there. He's like, yeah, I don't want to. He
Yeah.
goes the.
Of course, unfortunately, we've entered the era of Big Scotty now.
I don't know. Yeah, these are like I don't know. They don't. These engineering costumes are cool. They don't really use them after this movie, do they? I don't know. I guess they show up a
No.
bit.
Yeah, they kind of do. Yeah.
But yeah, like in next gen, they don't have like that distinctive thing. It's just like everybody's wearing the same uniform, no matter where you are in the ship.
Yeah, well, this movie you got to remember this again. This was essentially we're rebooting the Star Trek franchise, in the middle, or or with all the same characters. Is this Star Trek it's the first movie where you see another Federation vessel up close that is not like the Enterprise.
Yeah,
Like, because in all the original series, you had other ships, but other Starfleet ships were either like just milk jugs with things glued on them, and they were in a single shot, or it was just another version of the Enterprise. It was it's the Valley Forge or whatever one they had in the Doomsday Machine. But it was always just another. This was not only the first time you saw another Starfleet vessel, but you saw what starships could do to each other when the shields didn't work for some. And so these ships would hammer the hell out of each other very quickly because now the shields are gone. Because before then you saw like the hull would have some burn marks on it, or something would fire and the whole crew would be like, wow, because the set would jerk this way or that. No, in this movie, it's like, oh, people are engulfed in flames and screaming, and like decks are on fire. And so that's why like the engineering people had to have different uniforms because the engine room was filling with toxic gas and they had
radiation and everything.
Yeah, so it's like that's why it made sense in this movie, but they never really had starships just hammer each other to pieces until Nemesis. Like it took that long to do that again.
Yeah, we're in an undiscovered country. It's more of a chess game, which is fun. So.
Yeah. Well, undiscovered countries featured like, well, yeah, we can't see you, but your shields are down. And what happens when we lock onto your exhaust fumes and you just fire every torpedo you have out of the Enterprise and the Excelsior? And it's like, oh yeah, again, an unshielded ship being hit by. That is kind of cool. Like when you realize like when you read all the back stuff and all the things about like a photon torpedo is essentially, I forget, it's like a pinhead-sized piece of antimatter. And the reason that they shoot flashes of light out of them as they move is that's matter-antimatter annihilation beginning. When you activate a photon torpedo, it basically unshields the magnetic sphere that's containing the antimatter, and it begins to come closer to the matter to hit something. Each photon torpedo hits with like the force of a Hiroshima bomb, is what they said. So can you imagine the hulls on these vessels that are tolerating that? The shields take most of it. But that's like, and then you throw the phasers in when you realize like, oh, and this movie had the first phasers that weren't like just like a beam, like a static beam, like beep, No, these they were like pulsing, like energetic corpuscular things that fired. And you look, it's like, oh, it's like a joule of energy. It's like, oh, that's insane amount of power just transferring through the hulls of these ships. And so this was the first movie where you saw that expressed.
Yeah.
Also, it didn't really come up very much again. That's one thing I like the reimagined Battlestar Galactica. They actually had a scene where the Galactica gets hit with a Cylon nuclear warhead, and but it gets through because in Battlestar it was even crazier even than like the Expanse, because you remember those scenes. Like they'd attack the Galactica and immediately the Galactica would be just throwing missiles and stuff everywhere.
Yeah.
And firing guns. Well, apparently, remember there was one scene in that where a nuke got through and hit the hull, and like the whole ship goes dark and it just starts to move a little bit, and then everything reboots because it's designed to be hit with nuclear weapons. But it's like, oh yeah, radiation through levels 4 and 5, and they're like, yeah, restart the engines. I mean, I know that's Battlestar Galactica, but it was like the one of the few times in a movie or a TV show even where it's like, oh yeah, this is the amount of energy being directed into these ships.
Yeah.
It's like, that's insane.
Which, like, you don't get to do this in the TV series that much because you have to shoot it again. It's like, we're not making another model. You're not taking a can opener and a firecracker to this thing for one special effects this episode. We need it for the other 26 episodes this season. So.
Yeah.
Kirk goes to the bridge. Spock has Saavik take the Enterprise out of dock. So, it's like, there's a first time for everything. They really languish over the Enterprise here, like the movie itself. I guess Kirk kind of taken aback when she's taking the ship out because he's like, hey, don't mess this thing up. So it's basically like the idea of like your teenage daughter is taking you're sitting along as your teenage daughter takes the car out of the garage, and you're just like, don't hit anything.
This is enhanced by the James Horner soundtrack.
Yeah, which is great.
It immediately establishes this more adventurous tone than like the Jerry Goldsmith the motion picture soundtrack, which is also cool.
Yeah, it's amazing because it's like one of a kind. They never did that again because they used like that bass guitar that's like the size of like a garage. Which there's like one note in this movie that they have it, like bring it back for like literally like one note. Also, I think like I haven't compared it, but I believe like almost because he does Aliens later on, and he basically like recycles like almost everything from this movie for Aliens.
Yeah, the Khan theme is basically in Alien.
Yeah.
That's just the Khan theme kind of reimagined. But hey, it worked. You remembered it. So.
Yeah.
I got a new lion shot glass just now.
Okay.
In honor of that, we'll see what happens. And it worked.
We cut to Carol and David. They're doing stuff with the Genesis thing or whatever. The Reliant, it's on its way to regular one to take the Genesis. Like the scientists are all angry about it. But like here they mentioned like, no, the military is coming to take our stuff. Which that seems like a, kind of a departure from the rest of Star Trek, because Star Trek's always like, no, we're all scientists that just happen to work on a vessel that has military things on it just in case. But here they're suggesting that like a starship is complete, like a Starfleet starship is purely military, and then like these space stations are like for scientists to do the real work. So yeah, Chekhov gives them a call and like tells them they need all that stuff, but Chekhov's being controlled by Khan, which they like. I don't know. Oh yeah, because Chekhov tells them that Kirk wants it because that's just his gambit, like to pull out. Like, yeah, that's what they're doing, and of course they have history, but you don't know about it. You don't necessarily know about it, but it's implied. It's like, yeah, only Kirk could take this, and But yeah, they're like, they're starting a conspiracy theory here because it's like, yeah, this doesn't seem right. Of course, they're right to suspect it, and it'll kill them all anyways.
Yeah, what's that song about Nirvana? Just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not after you. Yeah, sometimes it's true.
We cut to Saavik and Kirk are alone in the elevator. She wants to know how to like win the Kobayashi Maru. It's also she's kind of like in a weird like sleeping gown. I felt like this is like where Kirk was like, hey, she's hitting on me, that's cool. Then he realizes she doesn't want anything to do with him sexually. I don't know if that was kind of my read on this situation. I'm not sure if that's really there.
Well, he commented about her hair.
Yeah,
it's like, oh, your hair's down. She's like, it's still regulation. It's like, yeah. Conversation here. Trying to get laid, you gotta help me.
So yeah, she pauses the elevator, which makes McCoy mad when he gets in the elevator later on.
Yeah, I still love the McCoy. Who is holding the damn elevator?
Then Kirk's on. I think he's in his room. He gets a call from Carol. McCoy and Kirk seem worried about this because they're like, oh no, it's Carol. But
Like, does she want child support? Shit.
But then they get a video call and it's all broken up and it's being jammed, and so he hears like, "Why are you taking Genesis?" And he's like, "What are you talking about? I'm not taking Genesis." Um, you also hear like mention that like the scientists like discuss the situation because Reliance on their way. Um, then we cut
And
to
basically, like the whole science station is on vacation except for these guys, and they're like, "Well, this is why they're doing it because no one's here." And there was like all kinds of discussion like that, just basically explaining why there weren't 500 people on that space station.
oh, okay.
They do establish a lot of things and try to cover themselves pretty well.
Yeah, we don't have enough money for more extras. So
Yeah.
We'll just put some lines in that covers for us. I'll show you. Yeah, isn't the regular one just like a space station from the first movie turned upside down?
Yeah, it's the space station that got destroyed by V'ger trying to communicate with it.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So that's just that flipped upside down, and it works if you don't notice. It's like, oh, okay, I wouldn't know that unless you told me.
Then we got this. Kirk gets permission from Starfleet Command. They're gonna take the crew of cadets out to investigate Regular One because apparently they're the closest nearby. Which is, I don't know. That's just always a constant thing in Star Trek where it's like, why are you going? It's like, well, we're the closest people. If you're doing a story, whatever ship you're on is always the ship closest to the story. So.
That makes sense.
Here we get the first mention of the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, and then Kirk adds the needs of the one, which will also be brought up. Because like it's all the things like, yeah, we're going on this mission because Kirk wants to take the Enterprise out again. And then what will end up being is like, oh yeah, we accidentally saved, I don't know, not necessarily humanity, but yeah, we saved a lot of people because of this.
Yeah.
Kirk addresses the crew. He's assuming command of the Enterprise, and they're going on a mission to Regular One. Which again, there's also another scene with like Spock where he's like, I don't have an ego. It's like, I don't care if you take over the ship. Which is fun.
He says, I have no ego to bruise.
Yeah. Which is almost insulting to Kirk. It's like, no, that's what I want. I want egos to bruise. Which I guess is also why Kirk and Spock are always a great pairing.
Yeah.
Because Kirk always wants to kind of like get one up over somebody and kind of make fun of somebody, and Kirk, or Spock, just won't understand, or it's just be like, well, that's illogical. And then Kirk has to be like, yeah, I guess I'm the asshole here. Then we cut to they warp out of there. Which I don't know. I'd have to compare the warps. This is a cool warp that I feel like they kind of set the tone for warp in the rest of the movies and in the next gen.
Yeah. Kind of the single jump, which was like the Abrams verse warps are the coolest.
Yeah.
Because the ship's there and then it just disappears and there's like a boom. It's like that's actually kind of closer to what it would be, instead of, you wouldn't visibly see light distort around something that fast.
Yeah.
But it's like in this case it worked. Yeah, it just kind of disappears. And it was also a departure from the motion picture warp drive where everything just it just builds up like on a long track.
Yeah.
And then you go into warp and then you get pulled into a wormhole because the warp fields weren't balanced or something. Got to fire, photon torpedoes. And it's like, oh, okay.
And
the ship and the props start shaking, as my wife says. She loves Star Trek, especially when I'm watching the original series. It's like, watch out, guys, your prop's going to start shaking. You're really in the magic of this moment. I want to thank you for that. Of course, I married someone who hates science fiction. It's like, this is just dumb.
Oh, that's kind of weird because I watched Space Seed, and have you watched the remasters of all the original series?
Yes, yeah, I've seen those.
Which the special, because they change all the special effects and then they just kind of remaster the footage of the original. It looks good. It is kind of a little off with the special effects because it is also kind of weird preservation wise, because it means now this is the standard presentation of it, which is inauthentic to what it was. because I don't
Yeah.
even know where to get the originals. But same thing with like Star Wars. Like, can you watch A New Hope the original way it's presented? I don't know how
On
at the moment.
VHS.
Yeah. um I mean, like the special effects are good that they redid, but there also feels like it's just like, oh, you have a genius nephew and he did the special effects for Star Trek. They're not necessarily like movie grade special effects. They're just like, oh, they're good, but I feel like I could make these. So. But I don't know what kind of budget they had behind it either. So it's like, I don't know. I never saw. They were doing stuff like that with Next Gen, where like they got all like the original film and they kind of like reformatted it in widescreen and stuff like that. They did a lot of interesting things there, but I never saw any of those. Like, I don't know if those are streaming or if those are only on like Blu-ray releases or something. But
I'm not sure. I kind of rewatch those every few years when they come out on streaming.
well, yeah, that was also the weird thing because, well, I guess it's probably the movie split stuff. But like I saw the series on the Paramount Plus. It's like because of of course that's where Star Trek lives, and then the movies are on HBO Max, or I guess Max. Yeah. So, we got to the Reliant. Khan's first officer and Dancer tries to convince him that they should just run away with the spaceship and go wherever because like they're free, like we just go somewhere. But Khan declares his vengeance in poetry, so which is always fun. So. Especially delivered by Ricardo Montalban. Then we come back to the Enterprise. Spock needs to know what the Genesis is, and so Spock, McCoy, and Kirk go watch like a confidential video presentation of the Genesis project. We learn that it can create life from lifelessness. The Genesis device can like blow up and then alter an entire planet. This is like one of the first CGI effects in movie cinema. There's like this and that one from what young Sherlock or something like that, where it's like the mirror that fights Sherlock or something.
Yeah, there was a couple of them that came out almost at the same time. And this was like also like Tron did a lot of this stuff, but this was like one of the first things where they tried to make it photorealistic.
Yeah.
Whereas Tron was just trying to make it look like cool, like inside of a computer looks like. Whereas this was like, no, we're trying to make like mountains and planets and stuff.
I don't know,
and it worked because it was a presentation. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, this is like a really cool PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah,
Before that was even a thing.
Yeah, it still works here. It's not like it doesn't look awful. I mean, it does look simplistic, but it's still like pretty cool. So, but yeah, here's where they discuss like how Genesis, like, because they're all like in the presentation, it's like, cool, you shoot it at a lifeless rock and then it becomes a livable planet. But then like McCoy looks at it, it's like, well, what happens when you shoot at a planet with life? And of course it's like, oh, it overwrite and destroy all the life there and make new life. It's like, yeah, that's a weapon.
Yeah, because McCoy knew the answer to that question, but of course Spock is like, well, it would destroy such life in favor of its new matrix. New matrix. Pay attention to what you're talking about here. Destroy a whole planet full of people.
Then they get a call that the Reliant is coming in range. Kirk takes the bridge. The Reliant moves closer, but it isn't responding to hails yet. We cut to the Reliant, and I like the Khan says, "Let them eat static." This is where we get like the first mention of the Klingon proverb that the revenge is a dish best served cold, so which is again used in Undiscovered Country.
Now, see, Undiscovered Country is a Shakespeare line. So yeah, that's where that all gets mixed up.
Oh, I thought you said it was like some line.
No, revenge is a dish that best served cold is from Dangerous Liaisons.
Okay,
that's in French. But the Undiscovered Country is like that was a lyrical name that Shakespeare gave the future.
Oh, okay, yes.
Is the Undiscovered Country. So yes. Yeah, it does all kind of like it all jibes.
But yeah, Yeah, I think there's also, but yeah, I think I forget that. Yeah, I think when we see, because also like when we go back to when we see Khan's like hut or whatever, of course they have Moby Dick there, which is just like it's like okay, that's his story. um, I think he also mentions the line about like needing to read Shakespeare in the original Klingon, which they say that again in Undiscovered Country, which is just a great line where it's like I just like the idea of like the Klingons like one human because they just love how he writes stuff and what it means to them. And so they basically just like literally co-opt his culture into their own. Like, oh no, he's a Klingon.
Well, if you think about a lot of the stories, I mean, okay, think about like when we watched Titus. Now, imagine if Klingons were watching that; they'd be like, "This makes perfect sense. This is absolutely what you would do." It's like, to us, it's like, oh, this is like the Roman Empire fell to the Klingons. It's like, yes, this Titus is a man of honor and strength. He fed his enemies' sons to them. He dug his own eye out in shame. His own son was murdered, but he saw it as tribute, and he understood why it had to happen. This is a man of honor. Where we're just supposed to be like, oh my god, these people are lunatics. So yeah, absolutely, the Klingons. It's like it all made sense to them. Macbeth, it's like, yes, fight for the honor. It's plain, just everyone dies, of course.
The Reliant pulls closer. Savick gives like some regulations about like needing to raise shield when a ship gets this close. So, but Kirk just says like, "Yeah, go to yellow alert," which raises not the shields, but some like defense thing they say or something.
Deflector grid around the bridge is shown as going up.
Okay. The Reliant,
which could be the navigational / energy fields that really make all starships possible.
The Reliant raises its shields, locks phasers, and fires on the Enterprise. Which here they hit the engine section and really tear it apart. I think this is where they break one of the torpedo bays. So there's only one left, I think.
Well, they shoot the side of it.
Yeah.
Because so it's like I suppose the torpedo mount tube is gone. But this is the first time we see phasers used in the motion picture Star Trek era.
Yeah.
Because it was never used in the motion picture, and like I said, these were like they couldn't just be the beam of the these had like I said, they looked like muscular energy weapons just being pulsed through space. It was even more intense than like a laser bolt from Star Wars.
Yeah.
So they had to make it interesting. And even in like the Next Generation, the static beam is the most economical way to do that. But remember, they had like the plate like X-type emitters, where even though the Enterprise D was firing in one direction, the waves would come around and like make it pulse.
Yeah.
Because it fire in all different arcs and directions.
Yeah, because the Enterprise D has the phaser bank, so you see like this energy come from the ends and collide together to shoot in a direction. Whereas in the like original series, it was just a little dot and it would just like pulse out. Here it's kind of similar. It's kind of the little dot that pulses out. I mean, in the video games, it's always used as like phasers take the shields down, torpedoes blow up the ship. Where here it's just like, well, the shields are down, and like this is what anything will do.
Yeah, like I said, this is the first, and you don't see a lot of Star Trek after this where it actually shows what these vessels can do to each other with no shields.
Yeah.
They don't really get into that again until the Enterprise series where they don't have shields. Just magnetize the hull plates. It's like, well, it's okay. But they're using much less powerful weapons in the Enterprise era than they are here. So.
The Reliant hits the Enterprise with some torpedoes, which does even more damage. That's where we get like the engine bay just like throwing people around and fires everywhere. The Enterprise loses power. It's on auxiliary power. So, it loses its main engine or whatever. Khan calls asking for terms of surrender. So yeah, of course, this is where like Khan sees Kirk and Khan see each other on the view screen for the first time. So it's like, it does the the Shatner delivery of Khan. Because he's not really doing the Shatner delivery in the movies like he did in the TV show. Because in the movies you have a bit more space to like, okay, we're not shooting 25 pages today, and I have to like try to remember my lines as quickly as possible. Which all that pausing one wasn't necessarily like an acting choice. It was him remembering his lines. Because
I guess Ricardo Montalban, his so if you once you know this and you pay attention to his conversation with Kirk, see, because they never actually weren't speaking.
yeah,
They were filming this all separately, and it's like, oh, like Khan seems almost kind of kind to Kirk and his crew or whatever. It's because he was delivering these lines to like a production assistant who was a lady delivering Kirk's lines. He didn't really want to like shout at her and make her
yeah,
uncomfortable because he's kind of just an old fashioned guy.
yeah.
So it's like, yeah, he seems sort of contrite delivering his lines, which is like, that's an interesting choice. And then you realize it's like, no, he didn't want to make the PA cry by just going full like Shakespeare stage actor on it. You killed my family. You know, it's just like, oh yeah, don't do that to her. She's just like feeding you lines, you know. So.
Well, it's also great that Khan always calls Kirk his old friend, which is just brilliant.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, yeah, everyone's like chewing the scenery in this movie, but it's so fun. You know, it's like cool.
Because in some ways that's probably like accurate. It's like, oh, this is the only guy who can beat me. It's like he's my only friend. He's my only equal, and he's an inferior human being.
Yeah, he can't even get his eyes fixed. Well, I remember when they said eyeglasses were a thing of the past here, when they had all the laser surgery on your eyes. Because my eyes are they're not as good as they used to be, but I only have I have a pretty mild like bifocal prescription, and they're like, yeah, we can do this, and that. I'm like, nope, yeah, we're not doing that, buddy. I will wear corrective lenses because I am not. Because if that goes wrong, that's it. You're done. There's no eye transplant surgeries. It's like, yeah, I don't think so.
Not yet. Khan calls the gloat before he applies the death stroke. Kirk offers himself up as like an exchange. But Khan wants that, but he also wants the Genesis files and all that stuff. So like, oh, they don't know where it is. Here Kirk makes a gambit to lower the Reliant shields. Like, oh, I hope he didn't change the codes. So yeah, they bluff for a while. And then he says, like, all right, we're sending the information over right now. And it's just a signal to lower their shields. Then the Enterprise fires on the Reliant and deals heavy damage. So it's like now they're kind of equal in like how they've wounded each other.
Well, neither one of them have warp drive at this point.
Yeah.
So it means they can continue this slow dance of death. Because as we learn from like the Next Generation, like one of Picard's like infamous maneuvers is just pop in and out of warp, shell your enemy, and then move on, or move to point blank range and do like a blink warp and then just shell your enemy and then move out. But so, which is a lot of Star Trek combat is that why it's not visually expressed like this. So they immediately like, let's eliminate warp drives and shields, and it's like, okay, these ships will very quickly destroy each other like this.
Well, yeah, and also they're shooting each other so close, especially in comparison of space, that like it's cinematically it's amazing. Reality makes no sense, but that's
this is good old fashioned like master and commander, like give them a broadside. Don't do that with joules of energy and antimatter. These battles would happen very far. That's what was so cool about like The Expanse it was like fire 100 missiles and maybe one will get through. It only takes one though.
Or you're flying your ship in one direction, you're rolling it to fire at a missile, like while you're still going in that direction. Yeah, here where they still even have to like turn the ship to fire the torpedo. It's like, we know that torpedo can move by itself. You don't need to turn your ship to fire, but whatever. Yeah, it just looks cool to bring the ship about.
Open the torpedo door. Run silent, run deep.
The Reliant has a near miss as a withdrawal, which is just a cool shot of the Reliant, just like basically going over the top of the Enterprise. Which I like the quote where, because like if Kirk followed the regulations, they wouldn't be in the mess. So he says, "Mr. Savick, you go right ahead and keep quoting regulations."
Yeah.
Also like that.
There's a good reason that we do that. But this shit doesn't happen.
Yeah, it's also interesting they call her Mr. Savick. Scotty brings up a body of a young crewman to the bridge, which is like, I don't know. It doesn't make sense. It's like, hey, maybe get him to sick bay, but thematically it makes sense. It's like,
Yeah, it's
here's,
all for drama.
yeah, this is the cost of what you just did.
Oh, and also in the expanded scenes, you find out that's Scotty's nephew, but that
okay.
never made it into the movie. But it was a film scene where they explained it. It just was cut later because it was seen as almost too dark.
So yeah, the young engineer dies in sick bay, and Kirk lies to him, say like, yeah, he calls it the ship's underway, meaning like they have warp power or whatever. And
Yeah.
then he dies thinking that like he did his job. And Scotty here is just like very emotional and saying like he stayed at his post while the trainees ran. So it's like,
Yeah.
like this is really effective and really quickly gets across like this is the cost of war, which to Kirk is fun. So
Yeah.
because
And by the way, this guy's horribly burned and disfigured.
Yes.
It's like actually really good makeup effects, which was
Yeah.
a lot of people horribly burned and disfigured in this. They didn't have any shields. So
Yeah.
yeah, this is what happens.
But yeah, this is where these suits make sense because, like, oh yeah, this is the environment they work in, so they're gonna need something different than like the bridge suits you got going on. So
You got to remember the Enterprise and all ships in this universe are powered by matter antimatter annihilation, which is theoretically 10 times more powerful than the sun per pound. So it's like, oh yeah, there's some wild stuff going on here. It only exists in theory though. The sun we can see, we know that's real. That's nuclear fusion. But, yeah.
Uhura tries to contact Regular One, but there's no response. I do like they show like video screens of her like responding, and they're just like silent. Like they put all the TV on mute, but you just see her face at.
Yeah, those were cool. I like those scenes.
It
establishes a lot. It's kind of sinister. It's like, where is everyone? They were just talking.
The Enterprise pulls alongside the station. McCoy, Saavik, and Kirk beam down to the station.
Now, on the movie poster, it shows the Enterprise shooting phasers at the station. It never happened. This is like, oh, they're just going to fire phasers at the station. Which actually, if they'd done that and just gone on, it like Khan would have never. Well, I won't reveal the rest of it.
The music gets like a horror theme here, which I guess makes sense because like nobody's around, but something is eerie and.
Yeah.
This also feels kind of Aliens. They probably transfer this over to Aliens as well for the score. McCoy stumbles upon a dead body. Khan killed all the scientists on board and strung them up. Apparently they're all interrogated and they all didn't tell him anything. So
I mean, yeah, they were like hung upside down with their throats slit. And
yeah.
It's like you don't see it up close, but you can tell like something. They're just bloody corpses.
Yeah. Saavik finds like something in a container with her tricorder or whatever it's called now. It's
I think they're still tricorders. Yeah.
Oh, I thought that was purely a Star Trek thing or next gen thing. But I thought it was tricorders. But yeah, I don't know.
I thought they always had them.
I don't know. It's like in
Data could do more with them. He could really this is going to trigger a nuclear explosion. It's okay.
So it's Chekhov and Terrell in this box here. Also learned that the crew on the Reliant have been marooned on SETI Alpha 5, which we never see them pick them up, but that's okay.
Yeah, they're just kind of hanging around at the end of the movie. It's like, yeah, there's people on the brainworm planet.
Kirk and Saavik discover Genesis, and Carol have been beamed to the inner part of this planet that they're hanging around because that's where one of the trials was supposed to do inside of a cavern to see if Genesis worked. Kirk gives the order that to the Enterprise that if they don't hear from him in an hour to leave him behind. It's like, we're not gonna leave you behind. It's like if I don't contact you in an hour, I'm not alive. So get out of here. They beam to the inside of the planet. They're in a man-made corridor. They see the Genesis bomb. David jumps out to fight Kirk because David doesn't know who Kirk is. So this isn't some long revenge. Like, my father was never with me. This is just I don't know who these guys are. Like somebody just killed all our colleagues, pretending to be Starfleet. Like, this could be anybody. And so, yeah, Carol and David are alive, and some random guy.
Yeah.
Who will quickly disappear. Because then Chekhov and Terrell hold up Kirk, and so he's confused what's going on here. And so this, yeah, where like, oh wait, no. Like Savick, like, uh, I think like David learns that this is Kirk or something, so he like leaps at Kirk, and then Savick tackles him, and then this random scientist just gets evaporated by the phaser, which I
Yeah.
don't know if this is what phasers do here, or if Khan done something evil to these phasers.
No, it's just a further advancement of the disintegration technology from the TV series.
Oh, okay.
Because the TV series, people just they just kind of would glow red and disappear,
Okay.
like in kind of like War of the Worlds style. Whereas in this universe, they kind of just like evaporate.
Well, I remember like they hold back at like because that's a specific thing in like next gen where it's like they don't allow Starfleet to have like disintegrating weapons.
Yeah.
I mean, you can overload your phaser and do some nasty things, but like it's like technically all like the Klingon disruptors and the Romulan weapons are like illegal technically or whatever according to whatever rules are supposed to go on.
Oh well, yeah, they don't have like lower. Even if they don't disintegrate you, a disruptor is like a different technology than a phaser.
Yeah.
Because phaser means something. It's like partially an acronym word, but it's because all Federation stuff is like dual use technology because they're not just a war fighting organization. So it's also like, oh, we can use this for science or something. Whereas Klingon and Romulan like disruptor type weapons are just they're higher power, but they're cheaper to make and they're more reliable. And so yeah, they typically just kill or mutilate so badly where phasers have all kinds of delicate settings where they could like stun a kitten if they had to, if they dialed it down enough for some reason, if they had to. But they can also disintegrate things.
Yeah.
It's just they don't do it in like because there's a Klingon weapon called an agonizer that disintegrates you from the inside out. And then there's a Romulan weapon that like just vaporizes like your nervous system or yeah, it's like it's deliberately brutal.
Well, here
So
it's really brutal because everybody dies from these phasers screaming, and it sounds awful.
yeah. It's designed to be weird. Yeah. It's dark. This is the darkest Star Trek movie. Just for the little touches of like, oh yeah, these people in a really desperate situation.
Khan tells Terrell to kill Kirk. He can't obey, and so then which is funny after you just randomly kill the scientist, but like Kirk's too far and they don't even know each other, but it's like so he must hold Kirk in high esteem that he can't kill him even when he has a mind control worm in him. The worm starts making a terrible sound, and so then Terrell kills himself with a phaser, again dies screaming. Chekhov passes out and the worm leaves his ear. And Kirk kills the worm with the phaser.
And it also dies screaming.
Yeah.
He's shooting this off right next to Chekhov's head. Like, thanks, Kirk.
Kirk gets Khan's calm and taunts him and yells at him.
Yeah, because I guess it's not. He thought when Tyrell died, that was Kirk being killed.
Yeah.
So Khan was actually surprised, like, "Oh, you're still alive." Yeah. But he's almost happy too. He's like, good, there's still some games to play. You can torture all your friends to death while I make you watch, or something like, what Khan would think.
Well, yeah, because like the line I wrote down, he says, I've done far worse than kill you. I've hurt you. Which is a great nonsense line.
It's almost as good as the line from my favorite bad guy from Mission Impossible. When Philip Seymour Hoffman was the bad guy.
Yeah.
I'm going to find someone you love. I'm going to hurt him real bad. And he does, too. Yeah. He's like, he lives up to his word.
Khan gets, they know, they're able to, because they're also like hiding around the planet here. And so is the Enterprise. And so they get a hold of the coordinates for the Genesis like torpedo and the other thing, and they beam
device.
Yeah, they beam it up, and he says like, I'm gonna maroon you in the inside of this planet where it's lifeless, and we get the infamous Khan yell from Kirk.
Yeah, which is how I start every day. Wife hates it. I'm doing this shit again. Yes.
We cut to a bit time later. Kirk is hungry, and Carol talks about the Genesis cave and a lifetime of food. So other people leave, but Kirk and Carol are alone for about. Here they talk about their son and how Kirk was supposed to stay away, but also she didn't tell him that that Kirk's his father. Kirk.
So Kirk's doing like this child support tables in his mind. Like, well, no, he's technically an adult, and he's also Dr. Marcus, so he's graduated college, so I'm off the hook for that. And
Also
the
on
Star
this
Trek
word,
economy where it's free.
yeah, it's
Too.
free.
So,
Yeah. Kirk admits to being old and worn out. Cut to the Reliant. They've restored power. We come back to the inside of the planet. Carol shows Kirk the Genesis cave, which is just lush with plants and water. So it's like, yeah, we can actually live here forever.
it's the Garden of Eden.
Yeah.
Wow, and it's from the Book of Genesis. Holy crap! It's all together.
And I like the sun that isn't shown. It's like, wait, what's that? It's like, don't worry about it.
Proto matter. Huh? Talk about in the next movie.
The riot comes around the planet next to the space station. They expect the Enterprise is there, but it's gone. We cut back to the inside of the planet. Savick asks once more about the Kobayashi Maru and how Kirk beat it. And here Kirk admits to just cheating to beat the test. Even saying that, like, oh, they rewarded me for original thinking.
Which they wouldn't do, actually. Sabotage computers and undermined. It's like, okay.
It's almost like super naive to think that, like, in a world that's so good that nobody would think of cheating, but because Kirk did, they're like, oh wow, we should reward that thinking. Kirk says, I don't believe in the no-win scenario, which is essentially like that's what he's gonna have to face later on.
And he punctuates it by opening up his, his communicator. Like, Kirk's Enterprise, it's been 2 hours. Are you ready? It's like,
yeah, because there was a ruse earlier on where Kirk was talking to Spock, and it's like, yeah, it's going to take like 2 weeks to get everything ready. And here, like, it's like, oh, it was all a ruse to like fool Khan into thinking he had the upper hand when actually they're like pretty even. Actually, no, the Reliant actually has the upper hand because they have to go into Nebula to make it even. So, but the Enterprise is back in somewhat working order, more than it was. So that being in Act 2. So Act 3, the Reliant still has an advantage. They take the Enterprise into they chase after the Enterprise into the Motaro Nebula. And so here they'll use the interference to even the odds. So apparently, like, shields don't work, targeting stuff. Like, really, it's what's presented as like the crackly view screen is the only thing they're using to really do anything. So,
and this is the first time in Star Trek we have the when Kirk comes to the bridge, he's like, give me a tactical. And it's just a computer display of the two ships chasing each other around the planet.
Yeah.
Because what they did was they positioned each other so they couldn't sense each other through the planet. That's the first time you see a tactical display. It becomes kind of a thing that shows up again and again and again, even in next generation. Then it just stops. We don't express anything that way anymore.
Yeah.
Which is kind of weird, but yeah, which would be actually useful though.
We see the crewmen get ready. They load torpedoes and man battle stations. There's like a warning torpedo shot across the bow on the Enterprise by the Reliant, which I don't know why they wouldn't just hit them or if they just actually missed. I don't know.
Well, remember when they were pulling away from the Enterprise reprisal attack earlier, the first officer or whatever said they damaged the warp drive and the photon controls. So apparently they couldn't adequately aim the photon torpedoes from the Reliant.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Kirk.
That's what happens when you watch a movie like 5 times. Oh, okay.
Kirk taunts Khan and angers him to follow the Enterprise into the Nebula. The ships enter the Nebula. Shields and sensors don't work. The Enterprise gets behind the Reliant and just blindly fires phasers and misses. Here it's basically a submarine battle now. So.
Well, this is the first time too, like Spock mentions it's like, and this is the first and one of the last times in Star Trek where it's like you can fight in all 6 directions in Star Trek. You don't, but for some reason everyone just rams right into it. like the Romulans are going to penetrate our line. It's like, what good is a line in space? It's the Romulans. Go low, come up high, and so this is the first time where it's like, oh yeah, these things are like submarines. Like they can fight in all directions, first and only time I've ever seen this in Star Trek.
Yeah.
Even in the Balance of Terror, everyone is just fighting in a straight line. It's like, why are you? Because they're fighting like ships on a sea. It's like, okay, over the horizon, and they fire at this distance. It's like, no, you got the 6 directions. You can go anywhere. But yeah.
Yeah. Battlestar and The Expanse were way better at that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, because the only reason you would engage if you just had, it's like we have to fight. It's like, okay, so we have to meet up somewhere. But yeah, in Star Trek you don't, because you're literally you can go like 9 times the speed of light, and yeah, it's like distances are a lot more compressed like that.
and I bet it's just like a limitation of the of how you shoot the special effects. Whereas now with CGI, you can literally do anything. There's not like a ground. It's like, oh, we need a studio with a 60-foot roof to do this. It's like, nah, we got CGI now. You don't have to worry about that. It's like your space is infinite.
Yeah, but now in Star Trek, like, they try to make everything really fast.
Yeah,
it's like the ships still get close and fast. It's like they wouldn't do that. They're slinging antimatter weapons at each other. Like, you can also fire a photon torpedo at warp speed. Like that is a thing that has a Klingon tactic.
Yeah,
like you just fire it from, and then you drop out of warp, and it just slams into your opponent. It's not really discussed. It's kind of like in Star Wars when they just like, let's just go into hyperspace into our enemy. It's like, well, why aren't they doing that all the time? They should be constantly doing this, but it's, you got to have a story too.
Yeah.
Everything can't be the Battle of the Tirpitz, right? Just like annihilating things.
The Reliant and Enterprise getting close range again. Here they just both take damage. They're just trading blows, so nobody really gets the upper hand, even though the Enterprise had the upper hand for a bit. The Enterprise is having radiation issues. We cut to the Reliant. Khan's first officer dies, which he's sad about. Which really just everybody dies.
Everyone's essentially dead at this point. Which is weird because actually the Enterprise is at a distinct disadvantage if you're just spraying fire around, because the Enterprise is a much broader surface to hit.
Yeah.
The Reliant's a pretty narrow profile ship. So, but it's also, when it gets hit, like, it's hitting everything. It's not like the damage is spread out.
Well, again, it's like the 2-dimensional thing, and like maybe it's easier to audiences, but like there's no reason like these saucers should always be at this.
Yeah.
Like they can cross the T, but you just never do it.
The Enterprise should come up from underneath.
Yeah.
And they do that in Nemesis. They do a lot of that.
And, I mean, easy. And why even go? You don't even have to go like saucer first.
Yeah. Back into it.
Yeah. Here Spock suggests that Khan is a great strategist, but inexperienced and thus thinks 2-dimensionally. So this is the genius thing where basically Kirk moves the Enterprise on the Z-axis. So actually it would be the X-axis. Like X would be up and down, Y is straight out, and then Z is like coming at you.
Yeah.
In 3 dimensions. So yeah, they just kind of moved
Depending
down.
on where he's orientated, though.
Yeah,
because he's like Z minus 10,000 meters. You should go at like sinking. Like, oh,
okay. So yeah, they end up like getting behind the Reliant again. Here, Chekhov has a little pull-out thing. If Chekhov comes to the bridge, is like, "Yeah, I got a mammoth station." It's like, "Sure, you just had brain damage 30 minutes ago. Like, why don't you man the torpedo?"
Fired a phaser off next to your head. Get in there. How's your eyesight doing?
He's got the Atari controller out, so he's ready to go.
Yeah, that's very. If you freeze frame that, that's a pretty well thought out, like, because it, like, if you read what it says, like, you can freeze it in high definition. It's like phototorp launch sequence, and it says you got to do all this, and that, and then press button to fire, which is like, oh, that's unusual. I think you just press a button on this, but you don't accidentally press it that way. Fire the torpedoes in dock or something.
Well, yeah, he's got a manual fire it, so they they don't want they want the computer to fire the torpedo, not a person. So you got to have a bunch of safeties you got to undo to launch it. It's like that little thing on the missile launcher in an airplane where it's got to lift up the safety and fire Fox 1, flip the switch. So.
Yeah, this was kind of like the Nostromo self-destruct sequence. It's like, why does she got to do all this stuff? It's like, well, because if you just press the button, this could accidentally happen. Yeah. And also, the Nostromo exploded like a sun-going supernova, so you don't want to make that mistake too many times.
So yeah, Chekhov hits the Reliant with several torpedoes. The Reliant loses a warp pylon, so it's like, well, it's done for. And then The Enterprise asks for the Reliant surrender. Everyone except Khan is now dead on the Reliant. Khan doesn't respond to Kirk, but he's just speaking to himself in poetry and starts to set off the Genesis torpedo, which is
Well, remember, like when Khan, like when he first comes on screen, you see a hand come up,
yeah,
and then like half his face is burned off.
yeah,
He's just looking at the screen balefully with the one eye that's still alive. He's like, no. And then he crawls over, and the Genesis like has that Nostromo self-destruct,
yeah.
like elaborate, like you got to do all these steps to arm this thing.
Spock detects an energy spike. David recognizes that as the Genesis wave. The Enterprise works to get themselves out of the nebula, but like they currently don't have warp speed, so they're not going to escape the blast. Spock goes down the engine room. He's going in the engine room with like that. He goes into the room that's full of radiation. Like McCoy tries to stop him, but then he just like he's like, "Yeah, you're right," and then he like does the Vulcan nerve pinch and this like "remember" on his face. So which will come up later on in other movies.
This was all like ad-libbed basically the day of shooting. They came up with this idea. Leonard Nimoy came up with this idea.
Huh, okay.
Because he didn't, all of a sudden he's like, we need to be able to bring Spock back. He was supposed to die like with the first encounter with Khan. Spock was supposed to be killed. That's how it was originally written. Died as a result of the attack.
Yeah.
And it was like so negatively, because word leaked before this movie came out that Spock was going to die. And they're like, okay, this isn't popular, so we got to find another way to do it. And they found the best way because it wasn't an unceremonious death.
There's also we get Khan talking to himself. He's trying to blow up Kirk with himself. And you get from hell's heart I stab at thee, with my last breath I spit at thee. You know, just great.
That's from Moby Dick, I think.
Okay, that'd be perfect then. So okay.
Yeah.
Which here Khan probably dies, as he says, with my last breath, but you know, we just cut to like, well, actually, first Spock gets the engine fixed by going into the the tornado tube of radiation.
By manipulating the antimatter to lithium crystal matrix with his hands that somehow fixes the problem.
You can't put a robot in that room.
Be as dramatic.
So yeah, they get power to get warp speed. They escape the explosion. The Genesis matrix is reforming the nebula into a planet, which looks pretty cool.
Yes, because the Starship is Enterprise is being shown at warp outrunning this Genesis wave, which is kind of a cool, because it's just that light blurring effect when it's in warp.
Well, also like leaves these concentric circles along the way, and also like the nebula disappears because now it's being all the matter in the nebula is being congealed into a planet, which is cool. So, which really it's just them cutting from their nebula special effects to a thing blowing up, and then you can just use your imagination as like, oh, what's going on? Kirk gets the engine room. McCoy tells Kirk he needs to get down the engine room. He gets there. Everyone's like kind of like holding him back from opening the door, and he's like, he's dead already. And we got Kirk calls for Spock. Spock gets up and like tucks in his uniform, which is just a great little bit.
I call that the Picard pull. Or not, it was Nimoy that came up with it. Remember, Picard was always doing that.
Yeah.
Stand up, straighten it down.
His skin is like kind of sloughing off from radiation poisoning. We get the needs of the mini line again. We also, this is also another repeat of another line that says earlier. It was like, I have been and always shall be your friend. And then he gives the live long and prosper. And then Spock kind of like turns over and dies. Then we cut to Spock's body's loaded into a torpedo to be buried at space and fired into the new Genesis planet. Here we get the great line where like Shatner like kind of breaks as he says his soul was, and he kind of pauses from like the most human. And then when he says that, Saavik sheds a tear, which it's like, well, the Vulcans don't cry. But again,
she should be like insane right now from doing that.
We get bagpipes play, which are they playing Amazing Grace? I don't know. And aren't they playing Amazing Grace here?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
Because this is a Christian Star Trek.
The torpedo's fired. Kirk goes to read. We cut to Kirk reading A Tale of Two Cities and discovers his glasses are broken, which it's like just one thing after the other. David comes in to face and also console Kirk for like losing a friend, and basically like, oh yeah, you've been, Kirk even says like, oh, I've been tricking and cheating death my whole life, so I've never really had to like be confronted with it. Because I was kind of like Kirk was like Kirk always dies, um, but I don't know. I mean, that's what you have red shirts for. Like, they're supposed to be the people who die, but because we don't know, it doesn't feel bad. But now here we have a main character dying. That it's like now you feel bad. So.
Now death is real.
But here David says that he's proud to be Kirk's son, and Kirk gives him a hug. We got Kirk doing a voiceover log. I can't even remember what they say. He's just kind of recounting the situation. Then Kirk talks on the bridge about feeling young again. And then we cut to a shot of the new planet where life forms are already growing, and a final shot of Spock's torpedo safely landed on the planet. And then we get Spock doing the voiceover, giving the space the final frontier speech. And that's the end of the movie. So.
Is this where it changes from no man to no one has gone before? Is that when
probably.
This change happens? Okay, because I know it was sometime in the 80s they like amended that. Which makes sense because the Federation is like an alliance of all different kinds of aliens and people. Yeah. So it's like, it would say where no man has gone before, it'd be kind of weird.
Yeah.
It's like, well, even though it's like a lot of it's humans, but.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, well, it's also kind of a weird thing where it's like human is both like a negative and a positive used in this movie.
Yeah.
It's like Vulcans being like, they're so human. And like, that's like, yeah, we're barbaric and insane. But, sometimes we do things nice. And it's amazing that we did that at all.
Also, the most successful form of life in the Federation. Humans far outnumber all the other groups because we cooperate with people and we don't have the cultural norms that other species do or something. There's some weird long thing in Star Trek about like, why are humans so prolific? And it's because like, well, humans are the multi-tool of the Federation. They don't like stand out in one thing, but they're good at a lot of things. Whereas some species have such narrow cultural beliefs and views, and it's like they don't really stand out like humans do, because humans can essentially be all things.
Well, also, like it's never really shown. It's only implied of like all the horrific wars that we have yet to have happen that we survived, and it's like, well, that's kind of it's terrible that you guys did these things together. It's more amazing that you survived it.
To do it again.
Yeah.
That's a later point.
So of course for the Abrams verse, or with the Kelvin universe,
yeah, something like that.
They bring Spock in. But also they do the thing where they basically remake Wrath of Khan for Into Darkness, and it's cool for a moment, but it mostly sucks.
Yeah, there's high points and low points for sure. There's high highs and low lows. Yeah, the Benedict Cumberbatch Khan is more menacing than this guy, but also ridiculous at the same time. It's like, well, that's just too much.
And we got the Kirk Spock role reversal, which whatever.
Yeah.
Oh, we're sending a probe into space, to go to the Notara Nebula. So, what scene from this movie are we chucking into space?
Well, just the Kobayashi Maru opening scene.
Okay.
Because that's how this movie is written. That establishes everything, and it follows through and pays off in the end. So that's the only thing that makes sense. That's the amazing thing about this movie. This is like following a recipe from a book very quickly, but it all hangs together so well. It's like, this chicken is amazing. Yeah, it's so simple. It's so simple.
Yeah.
It's so amazing how it turned out.
And you can find us on Letterboxd, username VHE, 1 out of 5 stars. We give Star Trek II Wrath of Khan.
We're gonna have to give it 5.
Yeah.
This has been this is a roundup of the best, so this is gonna have to be a 5.
So you can find us at verhoeveneffect.com. There you can give us we have listener support. You can support us a month of stipend on 99 cents, 49 or $9.99. Cancel any time. You can rate our podcast on whatever platform you're listening on. Remember, the only thing the algorithm listens to is the highest rating. Remember, you control the algorithm. The algorithm doesn't control you. You can find us at Twitter at Verhoeven Effect and Blue Sky Social at Verhoeven Effect. Facebook of Verhoeven Effect, and you find us on YouTube at American Greed Factory and watch both this and that show live and unedited. So for the Verhoeven Effect podcast, I'm Conlon.
And I'm Nathan.
Goodbye, America.